Episode 265, Divine Masculinity, with Bob Smith.
Welcome to Latter-day Life Coaches, the podcast where each episode is a conversation between me, Heather Rackham, and one of my amazing coach colleagues. Each coach here is a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints and a highly trained, experienced life coach making a great impact in the lives of their clients. And together, we have one main goal, helping you live your best life no matter what. You ready for this conversation with a coach? Here we go.
Heather sits down with Coach Bob Smith to talk about what many LDS men think is the problem in their marriage: lack of intimacy, communication issues, constant conflict, when the deeper issue is often absence, not knowing what they want, not showing up with emotional presence, and carrying unhealed wounds that hijack connection. Bob shares a powerful story about reconnecting with his daughters through intentional time and vulnerability, then breaks down the recipe he teaches men to reignite intimacy: identity plus tools plus healing. The conversation tackles the differences between masculinity and toxic masculinity, why vulnerability creates connection, and how couples can move from competition to collaboration. Please enjoy.
Hey y'all, thanks for joining us today. I am joined by Coach Bob Smith. Hey Bob, how you doing?
Howdy. Great to be here.
Good. I'm so glad to have you here with me. Bob's been on before, and you can catch some of those episodes. Have you been on twice before? I think you've been on a couple times.
I think so. I'm surprised
And
you wanted me back. That's amazing.
anyway, so it's fun to have you here. And here we are. I was just thinking as we were hitting record that I'm still shocked that we're recording this in December. This is going to air in January, but I can't believe that we're producing things right now that are going to exist in 2026. It's so crazy to me.
So crazy.
It is. Okay, Bob, for those people who don't know you and haven't heard any of our episodes before, can you give people a little bit of, of an introduction so they can know who you are?
Sure. Yeah, you bet. Yeah, I'm Coach Bob. I help LDS men reignite intimacy and lead their marriage within 90 days. So I have a program that specializes in that. I had my own struggles in intimate relationships for a long time, and it just felt like I was beating my head against the wall for a long, long time. Couldn't figure it out. And then finally, after doing all of the therapies and searching out all the things and all the programs, then I was able to kind of put all the pieces together in a way that simplifies it for everybody else. So that's what I love to do. And I've been a coach for about 4 years and have coached, hundreds of men in that process on any topic you can imagine. But I really felt drawn to the intimate relationship space.
Well, you sound like most coaches, right? It's like we find and we get the help that we need, and it lights this fire inside of us to then take that knowledge that we've gained and make it consumable, I guess I can say, in a way that other people that are like us. And I'm so glad there's people like you that are willing to share their experiences, because it takes it takes some vulnerability to do that and put your story out there and to share in order to help other people. So anyway, it's awesome.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. That's actually was one of the main stumbling blocks of mine to even becoming a coach. I remember hearing about people going through life coach training and just having to open up in this room full of strangers and really just air all of your dirty laundry. And to me, with my background growing up, the worst thing you could possibly do was to air any of your dirty laundry or be vulnerable in any way, because I grew up as the golden child. And so I felt like being loved was based on my performance. So like the absolute worst thing I could possibly imagine is, how could I show my vulnerabilities and my imperfections, because then no one's going to love me? But I didn't realize, it took me a long time to realize that I wasn't giving anyone anything to connect with, including my wife or kids or even the men at church. A lot of us that are in this stage, or in this state, I guess I should say, we don't have a lot of close relationships. We kind of lone wolf it and we think that that's the only way to do things, even though it feels really bad and lonely, but we just don't feel like there's another way. So yeah, that was a challenge for me to even get to the point where I could see myself in a room opening up in a way that I could allow myself to be coached. So I guess I get the vulnerability side of it very intimately.
Yeah. And isn't it interesting? I think you kind of hit the nail on the head a little bit in that vulnerability is what creates connection between people. And so often we're so afraid to share parts of ourselves with the people that we love the most because to your point, a lot of us, most of us have learned that looking bad or whatever to other people is not the right way to be in a relationship. It's not the right things to do and share. So it leaves us with a void. Like there isn't connection if we're not willing to be vulnerable and share who we really are.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's hard it was hard for me to overcome that, to be quite honest. And I still deal with some of that too. There's still moments of, am I going to put this email out? Am I going to put this video out? Am I going to open up to my child in this way? I'll give you a quick example on that if that's okay.
Yeah.
So so my kids, I'm in a divorce situation where I get to see my kids, every other weekend, and it's been, a difficult journey to co-parent together. And in this process, the kids feel in the middle, and then they have their own kind of emotions and everything to deal with, and they've been struggling with some stuff over the last couple of months. And I just felt like there was this distance between us because I hadn't been able to see them as often and connect with them as much as I would have wanted to. And I just felt like there were things on the other side that weren't contributing to my relationship with them either. But then what I decided to do was take them on a journey down to Waco. And I don't know if you know where I am. I'm in Prosper, which is maybe 2.5-ish hours north of Waco. But
Okay.
there is the women's Big 12 soccer championship game. Now, I don't follow women's soccer, but BOU was playing in the women's Big 12 championship game in Waco. So I thought, how fun, what a great opportunity. I wanted to go see them. But most importantly, what I really wanted to do was I wanted to get my girls in the car with me in a confined space. Maybe that sounds like I'm trapping somebody, but I'm not trying to make it sound that way. But to
But we
kind
all
of
kind of
trap
try to
them.
trap our kids occasionally, don't we? I mean,
You
that's a
have to
thing.
kinda trap them because otherwise they're up in their rooms or they're on their iPads or they're on their phone or, watching TV or whatever. And so I just said, "Let's do it." And so I got them in the car and it took us, a couple and a half hours. We were there at the game for a couple hours and we had a couple and a half hours on the way home too. But what that did, it gave plenty of leeway to have conversation, to open up and to kind of almost like drill through the nut that had been placed over the relationship to where we could actually get to the connection piece again. And it started with me being vulnerable with me. And part of the vulnerability, even as parents, I think, is even just acknowledging that there's a problem. Say, hey guys, I know there's something going on. Can we open that up and talk about it? And my girls were resistant at first. I said, well, we have a long car trip back. So, let's figure out what we need to do to get this resolved, whatever's happening in between us. And by the next day, we had a very heart to heart, especially with my youngest, where she was crying, I was crying. She was able to share what was really going on for her. I was able to just receive that openly. I was able to share what was real for me and where I felt like we had some breakdown and some issues happening. And she apologized to me for her part. I apologized to her for my part, and the connection had happened. So I guess I just think that that is maybe an example, a good example. I've had bad examples I could reference too, but maybe a good example of the whole point of doing this whole trek was to create connection and to create enough space and enough time in order to foster an environment to where that connection could happen. And for me to lead out in that, to say, this is kind of what I want to have happen. And I'm willing to go to a vulnerable place to get there. And I hadn't understand that for a long time. And I think that's really where marriages can break down too, is when we feel like we're just here for performance or to to try to provide the person that we think our spouse wants, and then we end up not even being present in the relationship in the process.
I appreciate that you shared that. I think about times with some of my kids, and, they don't really love sharing things to some of them. And remember the times when I have shared shared me with them. I've been vulnerable, and we've been willing to my husband and I've been willing to share some things with them, are the times when they are more willing to share with us. So I think it is we lead and we open conversations, I think, by example, and showing them that it's okay to do that.
Yeah.
But it's still scary. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
Bob, you mostly work with men, correct?
I do. I do.
Yeah.
It's a men's program.
Yeah. Sorry, ladies. We have plenty of coaches that can work with the ladies, but Bob has this men's program here, and which I love and appreciate. But Bob, what do you find is the core problem that most LDS men come to you with?
That's a beautiful question. So I really think what men come to me with, they come to me and they say things like, she's not interested in intimacy anymore, or we can't communicate, or she's always upset or emotional or angry. And what we get back to is it's almost like they think that's the real problem. But the real problem isn't that you can't communicate. They're not bad at communication. It's that they're absent from the conversation. They might say, well, I don't really know what my wife wants. Well, do you even know what you want to begin with? Where are you in that spectrum? And so what I found to be the most helpful thing in all of this is you got to have the right ingredients to make the right cake, right, to make the right recipe. I made some chocolate chip pumpkin muffins this last weekend for the first time. It's a new recipe I hadn't tried before, but I tried and it was very successful, evidently, by the rave reviews that I got. So I was really happy about that.
But
But
you have to
even
follow a recipe,
but you
right?
gotta
Like,
follow the recipe.
yeah,
Yeah. And
yeah.
I even did a good job. Have you ever, where you have to separate the dry stuff from the wet stuff? And so then you mix in the dry over here and then the wet over here, and then you combine them after that. I
Mm-hmm.
think I hadn't really done that in recipes before, but I've started doing that lately, I guess over the last several years. But that was something that I did with this, and I think it helped, produce success with that. And so I think the part where I've struggled and where I think these men struggle is that you don't have the full right recipe in place to be able to step back into your divine masculinity, into that leadership role where you're not this dominating person. Cause I think so often these men think, well, if I express an opinion, then that's just me being toxic masculine or toxic masculinity. That's a phrase that gets tossed out there. Or if I say what I want, then I'm acting like a narcissist and I don't want to be a narcissist. So it's almost like we have these ideas of what this bad image looks like of being a leader. And so then these men often go to the opposite extreme and say, well, I'm not going to have any opinions unless it's her opinions. Like, where do you want to go eat? Or what do you think we should do about this? And so they just become absent from the relationship and from their life. So going back to the recipe idea, the reason why I struggle so much is I've done all these therapies. I've done couples counseling. I've done, years and spent tens and tens and tens of thousands of dollars on all this stuff, programs and all this stuff. But but when it's missing one of these elements, it doesn't matter how much work you're doing or how much you spend. It's if you're missing one of the ingredients, just like if I was missing flour out of my pumpkin chocolate chip muffins, it was simply not going to work no matter how much I tried to bake them or how many times I stirred it or how often I, separating the wet from the dry. And so the three key ingredients with this, which my program puts together, is one, you've got to first reveal who you are, what you want, what are your values, what is your purpose, what's the purpose of your relationship. You've got to figure out who you are and the direction that you are heading, or else you don't have any strength. It's just like a warrior on a battlefield. He's got to have a mission, a specific mission in place and an objective, and know what they're all about and know why they're there in order to be effective. The second piece is
I was just going
you've
to
got to
jump
have
in
the
really
right
quick.
tools. Yeah,
Sorry,
go ahead.
Bob. No, I think that is a fascinating list. And for most people that are listening to this, they're members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints and kind of think, well, yeah, I already know what my purpose is. I know like what my values are, right? We were taught those, like they were things that I learned at church.
no, like these are specific to you. This is not general things. And I think that's where we get tripped up sometimes. We just think that we know and we don't. We are individuals, and our heavenly parents sent us here individually with individual specific values and strengths and things that we can accomplish here. And we got to take some time to figure those out. And I don't think most people have really been intentional in doing that. Sorry, I just have to I didn't want anybody just to kind of wash over that and think, oh yeah, I know that. So anyway.
That's a huge ad. I mean, I think, I guess going back to just sharing from my experience with as far as like the church. So I grew up LDS, of course. I got baptized when I was supposed to. I got the priesthood when I was supposed to. I went on a mission like I was supposed to. I came back and went to BYU and got married like I was supposed to. I had kids. I had the career. I've done all the callings in the church. I read my scriptures. I prayed. I went to the temple. I fasted. I worked on I've helped in dozens and dozens of elders quorum moves. Like I've done all of those things. And my marriage was just freaking miserable. I mean, just absolutely miserable. And I could not figure out why. But in my brain, I said, well, maybe I'm just not trying hard enough. Maybe I need to read more scriptures. Maybe I need to get up earlier in the morning and pray harder. Maybe I need to go to the temple more often, or maybe we need to start doing family history work so we're more connected. And so that was the record that was in my head of we should be able to figure this out. We got prophets, we got prayer, we got priesthood, we got the spirit, we've got all these resources. Why can't we? And we're relatively smart people, I think. Why can't we figure this out? And it comes back to simply not knowing the ingredients or the full list of ingredients. Number one, like you so beautifully said, is we've got to figure out who you are individually and what you want. Each life is as different as the fingerprints that we carry. The reason why we have these fingerprints, why we're endowed with these divine fingerprints, is to remind us of the uniqueness that we are, and we're not meant to live the same life. Even though you're with a partner for life, it doesn't mean you're even living the same life they are. They're a part of your life and you're a part of their life, but you're still having two totally different experiences of this whole experience that we have.
Yeah, so true. Okay. Sorry for my interruption. You were going into number 2 when I cut you off, I
Yeah.
believe.
Well, please do. That was such a good ad. Oh my gosh. So number two is you've got to have the right tools. You got to have the right tool set. So, for example, in the program, do you even know what the sacred 6 elements of a great relationship dynamic are? Do you know what the container for collision is? Do you know how to operate within that? Do you know what the 5 rules are for relationships that help you, navigate that space? It's like all this stuff that we're never taught anywhere in any form or fashion, unless you happen to grow up with perfect parents. And whenever I've asked anyone that I've talked to, most like 99.9% of us maybe even didn't have a very good example of what it's like to have a great marriage. Some people are lucky and they get to see that, but a lot of us don't. So there's all these tools and tools of communication and receiving, but then this third element that is so critical. So that's the second element, and I think a lot of times you can get help with that in counseling, couples counseling, whatever it might be. But the problem is, it's like a warrior on the battlefield. If you go out and you have a great sword and you got a great shield, but you have this big gaping wound on your arm to where you go to pick up your sword in order to use it in battle, you can't even use it. You can't even begin to pick it up because you can't hold it. And that's the healing part. That's the third element that was so critical to all of this that makes everything else kind of gel, is because when we're wounded and operating from a wounded place, you can't even use the tool. You're so spun up in your mind and so out of the game and so not present in the moment that you don't even have access to the resource that you've been given or the tools that you've been given, to where it's like you can't pick up that sword and use it effectively. So you become very ineffective on the battlefield. And so the work that I do now, I help men actually heal from the emotional wounds they have, and I can help them heal in a very short period of time. I can clear, a problem within about 15 minutes permanently, to where it no longer comes up as an issue. So it's the combination of those three elements, and then you put that in the framework in the context of a group system where these men get to interact with one another, they get to sharpen one another in an authentic way. They get to practice being open and authentic. I guess going back to the whole vulnerability piece that we started with, is that's something that we need to practice because there's nowhere else that I'm aware of where you actually get to practice this and open up at a very deep emotional level while we talk about these big, heavy topics and these hard things that people are truly dealing with in their life.
My brain is going back to the wounded and the healing part. The reality here is that most people, just like we don't, like in number one, like we don't really know what our values are or who we even want to be or who we are. We also don't even recognize the wounds that we are carrying. Most of us don't even recognize that there are things that we could benefit from healing from. And we think it has to be some big, significant, traumatic experience in our life if we have anything like that. And a lot of us don't. And that doesn't mean that there aren't things that can be healed inside of us. And we all have those things. And it's amazing what happens when we allow healing to take place for us and our relationships.
It is. Yeah, it absolutely is. It's so critical. Just to put that into context, when we're born as babies, we only come with two fears. We're afraid of falling and we're afraid of loud noises. Those are the only two things that we come biologically wired with. And so that maybe puts in context everything else that we deal with, meaning, are you afraid you're not going to be enough? Are you afraid you're uh, of having a conflict? Are you afraid of money issues? Are you afraid of your kids uh, not no longer want to talk to you or pulling away from you for a period of time or losing this connection or whatever it might be? All these other fears are learned fears that then can be unlearned. So I guess to your point is there's a lot of things that we've kind of gathered on our way, not knowing that we picked them up even, but things that are no longer, really serving us. And that's what we get to explore as coaches. And now I have some additional training on top of that that helps actually heal and eliminate those in a very short period of time. So yeah, there's a guy the other day I was coaching and I coached him. Him and his wife are in a blended family situation. They've got, all the blended family struggles, things going on. They've had some intense moments and some circumstances happening recently. But after I coached him, we're able to tie some of these wounds that he feels of what's come up for him back to his dad, which is very often the case, right? Back to a parent or, your upbringing or wherever it might be. And that alone produced a massive amount of healing for him just to recognize that. So it really wasn't his wife that instigated that. It's really from a past wound that then is being re-scratched, I guess, in this process of interacting with her, or that feels similar, kind of tangential to the way that he had felt before, even though it's a completely different scenario, a completely different interaction. And he's a completely different person than he was when he was, 5 or 6 or 7 when all that started. But for him to recognize that produced a huge amount of healing. So it was almost like you have to cut into somebody to expose the wound that's underneath so we can allow the light of Christ to come in and start that healing process. But it's that cutting in process that's the scary part to go through. So we went
Yeah.
through that and then I was able to do a mind shift healing on him after that. And then we are able to actually clear the trauma around that actual experience to where that's no longer going to come up as a part of his experience or in a relationship with his wife.
And I mean, I would imagine that it's not like it's not coming up anymore, but you have the tools to kind of deal with it when those things do come up because we're not able to like I don't know, our brain does tricky things. Am I incorrect there and or have you seen something different?
It's the healing process. Well, by the time you get through the healing process, so you come up with like a problem statement like, I hate being in conflict with my wife, say, or something like that. And then as we work through that, by the time you work through that, you can look at the same statement and it no longer has an emotional charge to it. It either looks irrelevant, like that's no longer a problem and has no more emotional energy surrounding it, or it seems silly altogether.
Yeah.
So it could still come up that, I don't really like this interaction with my wife, but it doesn't totally take me out of the game in the process. That's
Yes.
the beauty of it. It's like I don't really like this, but now I'm staying in my power, and now I have options at my disposal that go beyond, fighting back or retreating completely.
Yeah. That is So true. Because our brains are kind of tricky little things. Like they don't forget the things, but we mature, learn how to, and we learn how to move forward with them, with those things and those thoughts still in our brain.
Yeah, 100%.
Is your
100%.
your program? It's a group program, is that correct?
It is.
And I am just curious how men do sharing in group situations. Is it make it easier for them? Does it make it harder for them? I want a little peek at this.
It's You'd be surprised. Here's my take on it. I think it's hard to get men to the point where there's feeling so broken and overwhelmed and overcome by the problem to where they don't know what to do. So I think it's hard to get them in. But once they actually sign up and they're in, transformation is incredible, especially in the environment that gets created. So that's almost like going back to that experience with my daughter. I think it often depends on the leader. Can the leader lead an effective or create an effective container surrounding the idea of openness, vulnerability, and authenticity? And so I think that's really the key behind it. The way I structure the calls and then the way that I try to lead it in an open, vulnerable way, just saying, here's what I did, here's where I screwed up, here's where I really struggled. And I feel like that kind of sets the the magic in motion. But yeah, once we get in there, they actually really enjoy it. And I think the men that are in the program feel tighter to this group of men that they've always spent, one time a week with for say 90 days. They feel tighter to them than people they've been friends with for 20
Yeah.
years, just by virtue of the vulnerability and the places that we go to inside of that program. Because you get a it's like opening up your chest and just seeing the heart and just exposing everything that's there. And that's it's so funny. Like that was what I was scared of most of all for so long. And that's the thing that actually makes people want to connect with you. That's the thing that makes people want to reach out and say, gosh, I totally resonate with that. Or man, I'm so glad that you said that. It makes people want to run to you and embrace you as opposed to being repelled by us.
Have you read the book Notes on Being a Man by Scott Galloway? Have you
I
seen that
haven't.
book
You say
recently?
notes on being a man?
Notes on Being a Man. So it's a recent book that he has published. He's a professor, an author, an atheist, and it is such an interesting book. And I think he speaks very well to what you just pointed out in that we kind of have a problem in our world where men, and he's pretty bold about it. It's pretty interesting to hear. He goes, I recognize I'm a white, privileged male in America. So
Yeah.
the things I'm going to
Yeah.
say are going to sound the way that are going to sound privileged, but I really see them as a problem in that we men are losing themselves. They like where there used to be a pretty big gap between men and women financially and in the workplace, we're not anymore. And somehow men are starting to lose their masculinity, he says,
Losing the edge. Yeah.
in that
Yeah.
process. And one of those big things is that men aren't in places where they're creating relationships with people anymore. Friendships, like how you just said, talking with people in a group, like they feel closer to these people than they've felt before. And things are just changing in our society. I don't know. The book was really fascinating to me. Of course, there were some things in it that I didn't always agree with, but the majority of it was so interesting. And I think anybody who has anything to do with raising boys or has men in their life, it's a fantastic book to read because there's points in there that, just to your point, that we just aren't recognizing are happening with men in general in our society. And it's going to be a problem if we
It
can't
is.
seem to curb those issues. I think we do have an issue. We have an issue that we need to take a look at and not run away from it.
Yeah. And just from my perspective, so a white male, you could even call me white male privilege perspective, is over the last, I don't know, many decades, the message that I've gotten, right, wrong, or indifferent, and I might be totally off by this, but it's almost like it's wrong for me to step into my masculinity because that's bad. And that means you're keeping other people, namely women, down by stepping into your masculinity. And I think that's the wrong message. I don't think that's
Right.
true at all. I think what we need strong men and we need strong women. And we need
Yes.
to encourage each other to be strong instead of thinking that our only strength comes from tearing each other down. And so that's kind of the way I felt like I'm almost embarrassed to be a white male or to have any sense of privilege because I shouldn't get all the stuff that nobody else gets. And instead, we need to flip the script and say, do everything you can with everything that you have for the benefit of the world and encourage other people to do the same thing. So yeah, we're not in the tearing it down and we shouldn't be in the tearing down process.
Yeah. And that was totally to Scott Galloway's point too. He's like, we have this, like toxic masculinity is not masculinity. Like, sure, there are people who live in a toxic masculinity space, but that's not masculine. And that's not that's not who he's talking about him. I like, that's not who I profess to want to be. And I know that's not who you profess to want to be. Like, masculinity is all the good things that come from being a man. And
Yeah.
we need all of those things. And anyway, I just think it's so important that we recognize that, right? It's not about like getting higher on a hierarchy than men or women. It's about being strong together, and
Yeah. Yeah.
we gotta work on that.
Yeah, and know that we're all running our own race. There's a book that I'm reading right now that I actually read over and over and over. It's called The Science of Getting Rich. And it sounds kind of shallow to begin with, but it was written in 1910, but it's still 100% applicable to today. It's one of those timeless books that will actually help you get into the spirit of wealth and how that connects with God and how that connects with us at our deepest levels at our core. And one of the concepts that it brings up over and over and over again is you have to make the shift from the competitive mind to the creative mind. So instead of being a competitor, we have to be creators. And when you're a competitor, then it's like me against you, or if you win, then I lose, or if I win, then you lose. And when we're in that mind, I think of more of that as kind of the toxic masculinity, and it can even be toxic feminism too, I guess, to say I'm going to run over you and take what I want to take without considering you in any form or fashion in the process. But when we flip into the creative spirit, then we know that there is no one that we're competing with. We're here to grow and to be the highest versions of ourselves and help others do the same thing. And in our process of growing, that is the way in which we do it is by helping others along the path too. So I'm a little further down the path than some people. Let me help you down the path to get to this place. And then there's going to be someone that's further down the path for me. I want to go get some help from them to help me get further down the path. Right. And I think that's the way God set up this game. And that's what it reinforces over and over and over again. And so I think when we're in that competitive mindset, we can even get competitive with our spouse in that, well, if I give on this, then she gets that, and I don't really like that. Or if we have this discussion, like last night, there was even a guy that I was coaching that he was worried about having a discussion with his wife, and the reason why is because he was afraid he didn't know what he wanted in the process. So he didn't start from a strong frame to begin with. And then he was afraid that the decision they were going to end up with was going to be something he didn't like. And so it was going to create resentment. So what he was really fearing was a resentment that it would potentially create because he didn't know what he wanted in the first place. And so I said, okay, here's what we're going to do. I said, I want you to pick one topic around money that you're going to get really clear about what it is that you want. And I want you to stay open in the process for input, but I want you to have a solid footing on as your starting point. And I also want you to go into that discussion, not willing to agree to something that doesn't feel good, but to stay in the discussion until you guys come out with a win-win. I said, how does that feel? And he says, that feels great. He said, okay, go forth and conquer. Right.
Yeah, and the tricky thing about that is sometimes it's so important for us to know what we want. And sometimes when we go into a conversation, and I think you alluded to this, is we end up not listening because we can only hear what it is that we're just focused on what we want. And it's important it is a two-way conversation, right? We're listening to them. We need to hear their point, take their input into consideration, because when we don't, that is when it becomes a problem. It doesn't mean that we have to completely disregard our own wants and our own needs, but we do have to be willing to listen to another person's points and perspectives, or they're not going to listen to us either. And so what we go in with thinking we want might change to some extent, as we work with a partner to figure that out, but we have things that are going to be like non-changeables, right? And we have things that maybe could be changed. And so it's a tricky balance to figure that out, right? Like I know what I want, but I'm going to listen. It's important to listen. It's important to know what our partners want and what
Yeah.
their goals are as
Yeah.
well.
Yeah. And I think for both people to come in with their wants, and I think that that's where a lot of these LDS marriages struggle, is we can't even get to that point in the conversation where he's expressing himself openly, authentically. One, because he maybe doesn't even know what that is that he does want, or maybe she doesn't, or they're not even able to have the discussion to where they can actually talk about that in a very open, meaningful way, to where the real power in doing that is not getting what you want, is actually getting more than what you want by creating a win-win scenario within the context of where ideas can come out that you hadn't even thought of previously. So that's the real beauty of going in with the mindset of, I'm going to come in with this framework, but I want to stay open to the discussion, because in the end, I want to create a win-win. And in doing so, we're both going to win at a higher level than we could individually. That's the whole point.
So here's the magic though. Like you have a different opinion maybe, and your spouse or whoever you're talking to might have a different opinion. And the connection comes in the conversation of listening to each other and then trying to figure that out, right? Like we get so stuck and think, well, it has to be my way. Or if we disagree, then we are really not compatible. Like there are some issues here. But the reality is that it's in those conversations that the growth happens. And so if we're willing to sit in those hard conversations, even though they might feel like we're disconnected, connection is happening when you can have conversations in a meaningful way, even though it might be hard. And I think that's the piece that we often forget about, that is where growth comes in relationships.
Yeah, that's beautifully said. I love that. Yeah, beautifully said.
Well, Bob, I want to know if there's anything else that you just feel that we need to know before we leave today.
I think what I want to send, hopefully, all the LDS men that are listening, or women that could pitch this to LDS men, is that there absolutely is hope for this to be changed. I know that when we're stuck in this process of feeling like this marriage is yucky and we're looking at potential divorce, it's either staying in a marriage that we don't know how to change or fix or deal with in any meaningful way to make it feel like it's going to be actually good or workable, versus getting divorced, which also feels like a horrible, option as well. So then it just feels so that often the partners or the people, especially the men I've talked to, feel like they're left with two terrible choices, both of which have significant downsides and problems and all these, hard things that go along with it. But what I will tell you, maybe just as hopefully a voice of hope and of reason, is that there absolutely is a way to help you to feel better. I know that's kind of generic, but there is a specific way to help you get to the place where you feel more aligned, where you feel more in tune, where you feel close to God, where you feel in your power. And I can help you go through that process because of the process that I've been through, and by virtue of the place that I stand. And I'm not done growing yet by any stretch of the imagination, but there is a way out, and it can feel way, way better than it does.
Thank you. I think that is such an important thing for people to know, because it does start to feel hopeless and like, what's the point? Like, where are we going to go from here? So,
Yeah,
all right, Bob,
100%.
how can people connect with you?
Well, a couple ways. You can email me at bob@becomethecaptain.com. Again, it's bob@becomethecaptain.com, or go to my website and book a call. It's just becomethecaptain.com. And then you'll see links to, book a call with me.
Awesome. We'll link to those things in the show notes. I appreciate it, Bob. Thanks for spending some time with me today. And thank you to our listeners who joined us. We always appreciate having you with us. So have a great one, everybody. Thanks, Bob.
Thank you so much.
Hey, we just wanted to thank you for spending part of your day here with us at Latter-day Life Coaches and being part of this conversation. Share this with your friends so that you can have a conversation with them on this topic as well. And as always, subscribe so you don't miss a single episode. Have a good one, my friends.